Well, greetings. My name is Peter Hamm, and some of you have seen some of my presets for sale or my IRs, impulse responses that I give away for free. And you may know that for quite a few years, I have been focusing on the acoustic guitar processing capabilities of Pod Go, and before that, Helix. When Pod Go came out, I thought it looked to me like if it could do things the way I thought it could, it might be one of the best values in an acoustic guitar processor. And people would have never thought of that necessarily when they're looking at it online or they're looking at demos where they seem to always show some rock guitar guy showing off how quick he can play. And I'm not going to do any of that. I'm not going to do a whole lot of playing today. But what I am going to do is something a little different. See, a lot of you have purchased my presets for making an acoustic guitar sound better through Helix, HX Stomp, or Helix Native, or Pod Go. And I just have a brand new set that is out this year that I just posted a few days ago. And there will be a link to that somewhere in the comments on YouTube here. So be sure to check that out if you want to. It's a cheap set. It's got 16 different presets. It uses a total of 8 different guitar sounds. They're all different from the ones I did a couple years ago. So they're all new sounds. And there's a lot more of them. And they're still the same price. They're cheap. So what I want to do is I want to give away all my secrets. Some of you don't want to spend money on somebody else's presets. Not only am I not insulted by that, I think that's a great plan. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I do. Now, I do have impulse responses that I created that we use, but you don't even have to pay money for those because I give those away for free regardless of whether or not you decide that you want to actually purchase my presets. So here we are in Pod Go Edit. And when you first come in, you might actually be in Factory or User Bank. We're in Factory right now, so you want to switch to the User Bank because that is where the magic's going to happen. We're going to ignore a lot of this stuff, and we're just going to go to a new preset right here. Every new preset looks just like this. You can do some jailbreaking and stuff like that, but this is how they look, and this is what I'm going to start with. The other thing you'll want to know how to navigate to is your impulse responses, which are right here. And you'll see number 101 to 116 on all of my units and contain my impulse responses that I created sort of electronically, but they sound fantastic. I actually have purchased some superior impulse responses from other companies, but I keep finding myself going back to these. I find myself going back to these because they sound really good in a band mix. And I play at church on Sunday, and that's what I do. So here we are in our new preset. And it has lined up a few things just the way you think you would want them. But we're going to move some things around to use this for acoustic guitar. First thing I want to do is I want to actually get rid of the wah. I'm not going to use wah-wah on acoustic guitar. So I go in here. You see where it's assigned to a foot switch toe. I'm actually going to make it assigned to nothing. I'm going to take the volume control and I'm also going to make that so it doesn't turn off when you hit the toe. The bottom line here is I don't want to actually turn on the wah, and I just made sure that I won't. I'm not going to leave this volume here, by the way, but I'm going to go in order of what I do. So the first thing I do is, see this cab block? This cabinet is simulating a guitar cabinet for an electric guitar amp. We're going to drag it to first in the chain, and we're going to change it to an IR block, which IR stands for impulse response. So now I've made it an impulse response block. I'm going to load up one of my favorite impulse responses of the ones that I have given to you. It's number 108. I play a lot of fingerstyle, and I find this particular fingerstyle guitar works really well. High cut, I don't touch because I want all the high end from the acoustic guitar to come through. But I turn that low cut and I make it all the way at about 100 or 110 hertz. You can use your ears to make your final adjustments on that. So now I've got my impulse response set up in terms of my low cut and my impulse response that is selected. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the level. You have to experiment with IRs that you get, but I will tell you that mine sound great if you put them at -4 dB. I tried to make them louder, but they, even as loud as they are, they need to be all the way up at -4 dB for them to work well. That's everything. You will notice if you buy my presets that sometimes I set it up so that I can use one of these foot switches to actually change between two of these different IRs, so you can literally switch the sound of your guitar. I'm not going to be doing that in this particular demo. I'm just going to show you how to set up a really great sounding acoustic guitar preamp effect in your Pod Go. All right, I've got this set up just the way I want it. Now I'm going to take my amp, and when you first get into any amp in Pod Go, it defaults to the US double normal, which is a great amp for electric guitar, but you don't need to do that for acoustic guitar. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in here. I double clicked, by the way, to get here, and I'm going to change to the preamp. And if you scroll way down, you'll see something called Studio Tube Preamp. Now, the Studio Tube preamp is not necessary to make your sound. It adds just a little bit of life and shimmer. But since on Pod Go you have to use an amp there in the chain, might as well use it since it's there. There's a couple things I do here. I turn this from mic to line, and I take this, I have found, believe it or not, that this default value of 4.5 is usually perfect. But I want it right after the impulse response, so I drag it into place. Now, just for fun, and by the way, I've been saving throughout. I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to turn this off. Right now you'll hear, hopefully, the sound of my guitar piezo all by itself. Now I'm going to turn on the impulse response, and I'm going to turn on the Studio Tube preamp. You can't really hear it very well because it's kind of quiet. In fact, this level you might want to mess with. I will generally take it all the way up to 10. Again, let's see if I can show that to you again. Here it is without any processing. And here it is with the IR and the tube preamp. It has a little bit more life to it. It's actually, the impulse response, for those of you who care, is basically telling the Pod Go, use this really complicated EQ curve, and it'll make it sound like there's a mic on an acoustic guitar and not just a plugged-in piezo. That's not the end of it, though. I will leave this volume here for now, but you also always have to use an EQ. This is all right, because quite frankly, the EQ is really where you really spice up the sound of just about any acoustic instrument. I'm going to move the EQ right before the volume block. That volume pedal block is going to move a bit, and then it's finally going to stop. So the EQ, I'm going to turn it on, but I don't ever want to turn it off, so I'm going to get rid of this foot switch assign. And I believe I will do that right here. I will simply say none, and there's no longer any foot switch assigned. One more thing I'm going to actually remove now while I'm thinking about it is, see this mono effects loop, which is up here? I'm going to remove that from a foot switch assign as well. And the reason is because I'm not using it. If you use it, you don't want to do this. So I'll get rid of that, and then I'm going to come back to the EQ. EQ is really magical for making your sound what you want. EQ is the most important thing for you to understand. So you should go to somebody else's brilliant website where they talk about it in detail when you get time. I don't know offhand because I don't look for that stuff because I learned the old-fashioned way. And I'm going to show you how I figure out how an EQ should sound on this guitar. First thing I will notice is that there's probably a low frequency that makes the guitar sound boomy. In my experience, the low frequency changes based on what impulse response I use. So I'm going to take the gain on the low frequency and I'm going to turn it all the way up. This is going to sound terrible. Now I'm going to play, and as I play, I'm moving this around. And what I'm doing, it's hard for you to hear this, so I'll describe it to you. I'm finding where, when I have this all the way up, it sounds the worst. And I'm finding that right here in the 170, actually a little lower, 120, is where it actually sounds the worst. I could increase my low cut. I could even do it here. But I find that this is a good way to tame the low end. Just make your low cut 100 hertz. Now I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to drop it only about 2. I usually do 2 to 3. All right? You probably cannot hear the difference when I turn it on or off. But you will when you are doing this in front of your own Pod Go. Now I'm going to look at the mid frequencies. I'm going to do the same thing. I will tell you a secret. For my guitar and my ears, I already know the frequency that is going to sound the worst because it's the same frequency all the time. I'm jamming it all the way up. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to and I always end up right here at about 2.7. Whoops. Didn't mean to do that. Right here at about 2.7. It's not letting me do that, so I'm just going to type in 2.7. Nope, doesn't do that. I forgot. Those numbers get wacky, so you really have to use the slider. There we go. That creates a whole lot of honky sound. That one I'm only going to cut, like I said, only by about 2 dB. What that does is it takes away some of that honk that is what people don't like about piezo pickups. In fact, if you don't like the sound of an impulse response, you might still want to remember that frequency because it might make all the difference in the world. You might notice Q, which is bandwidth of the cut. You might notice I haven't touched it. I have messed with it for years, and I have found that the default value is perfect for almost everything I do. This number is, Q means it's the focus or the bandwidth. And it's really unintuitive until you think about what it's doing. If you turn it all the way down, it has a very wide bandwidth. And if you turn it all the way up, it has a very narrow bandwidth. I'm actually going to change it on the high frequencies. You'll see that in just a second here. So now I'm going to take my high gain. I'm going to take that all the way up. And I'm going to start, and I'm going to do something weird here. High gain, I like to get a little air on my acoustic guitar because it's frequencies you don't hear on electric and you really actually want to bring out of the acoustic. So I'm going to turn the Q almost all the way down. I found 0.2 or 0.3 is good. Now it's going to sound a little bit bad until I get finished. EQ is usually a matter of turning knobs, making it sound bad, and then turning them again and making it sound better. So, in this case, I'm looking for the frequency that brings out the zing. You really can't hear it real well through your computer speakers and through a YouTube. I'm right here at about 9.6. That's very close to where I almost always end up. This one, again, now I'm actually boosting this EQ about 2 dB. Final thing that you might want to know. I'm going to go back. So that's the one I'm going to save. But let me show you something else you could do with that EQ if you wanted to. Because sometimes it has enough high end. If you feel like you have enough high end, don't use this for that. Instead, I'm setting this back to 0.7. And now I'm going to put the gain all the way up. And I'm going to find the other honk frequency. Because sometimes there's 2. So I'm going to take this. I will say it's in the mid-5s. It's usually in the mid-5s. It's not with the particular guitar I'm using. The particular guitar I'm using has really excellent sounding electronics. So to be honest with you, I generally don't have to worry about that. But I'm going to put this back the way I had it. So I have this at about 0.3. I had this at about +2. And I had my high frequency was at, as I recall, somewhere in the 9s, somewhere around there. So again, I don't know if you can hear this, but I turn off the EQ and I turn it back on to compare. This will be a subtle effect. Finally, that EQ, I always want it after my Studio Tube preamp. My Studio Tube preamp is doing things to the sound. I want it to be finished doing things with the sound, and then I want the EQ. This order is very important, and in my opinion, this is the order that works best. For a hi-fi sound, the next thing I want to do is I want to add compression. There are a couple compressors that work well with acoustic guitar in here. One of them is this Rochester compressor, but my favorite is the LA Studio compressor. It actually acts a lot like literally a compressor you'd find in an LA studio. It's based on a classic design. What it's going to do is it's going to even out. Very, very subtly, it's going to even out the sound. I find the one control I touch the most on this is gain. If I bring up the gain a little bit, here it is without. Yeah, that's a little bit more gain than I like, actually, to be honest with you, so I'm going to bring it back down. I will say 9 times out of 10 when I dial up the LA Studio comp, I am at or near the default settings. I love the default settings on this so much that if I'm in a hurry, I just dial it in and I leave it. See that? Now I'm going to take that thing and I'm going to move that before the volume pedal. If you put the compressor after the volume pedal will not have as much of an effect on your sound as if it's before. You might also notice that not all of my presets, if you bought them, have a compressor in there. For a hi-fi sound, which is what I'm showing you right now, that's what I want to do. I want to put the compressor in there. And just to make sure that I remember what this preset was, I'm going to call this tutorial preset. I'm just going to call it tutorial. I want to go back to, and you can see there it is. It has been saved. I got 3 more blocks. I don't like not messing with blocks. If I got 3 blocks, I'm going to use them. All right. I don't generally use the presets where you can actually change which blocks you can use for which. They're, I don't know what they call them, but you edit something in the preset and then load it back in, and you can cheat some of Line 6's rules. I don't do that for one reason and one reason only. I simply don't find I need to. But I'm going to put 3 more blocks in here. And the first one I'm going to put in is what's always going to be my last block, which is my reverb. You don't need reverb if you're playing live because your room has reverb. And I don't always use reverb. But if I'm playing sort of like I am on Sunday morning at my church, where we're also streaming live, and if anyone hears my acoustic guitar sound, I want them to hear it as if it's in a room. And you can pick the room that you want. I like Ganymede a lot if I'm trying to sound really, really spooky. I will do some real tricks with shimmer or even particle verg sometimes. But for something that's just a regular old sound, I'm going to this dynamic hall. I always turn my trails on all time-based effects. Now, hopefully you can hear. This is overwhelming. I like the dynamic hall in a big room. So I change this to 30 meters. I don't do a lot with this. I take the time down to a little over 3. I like my pre-delay a little higher at about 95. And I like the low cut and the high cut exactly where they put it. I very rarely touch it. Same with low frequency, same with low gain. The one thing I change in here, sometimes I change damping, but I like this setting. But I will change my mix to probably the high 20s. You probably can't hear a lot of that because the mic that I'm using is pointing towards me more than the speakers that this guitar is coming out. But I will tell you, you want to be careful not to do too much of this with headphones because it's going to sound very different than it does in the room. You will have to decide exactly where those settings work for you. Now, by the way, I've been saving my presets all along. I don't know, every now and then you'll hear my fingers hit the keyboard, and that's what I am doing a lot. Now what I'm going to do here is I am going to add a modulation effect, which seems really crazy. But you know what is really nice in this Pod Go, and I'm so glad that it's here, is the Trinity Chorus. The Trinity Chorus will not do any pitch shifting, but will make your guitar sort of sound like a 12 string. So I'm taking the rate literally to 0. I basically take my left depth and my right depth, down here. I put my center depth a little below there. You see I got 4, 3, and 4. My mix is okay at 50. I leave all these other things alone. There it is with the chorus. There it is without. I can tell you right now as I'm listening that I don't like the mix as high as it is. So I'm putting it a little bit further down on the reverb. But let's go back to the Trinity chorus. This is something I want to be able to turn on and off. That's really important. So let me turn this on so you can see what's going on. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to assign this. I like to put my modulations where I like to put them. So this one's going to probably end up right here in foot switch number 2. See that? If you actually could see the unit right now, you'd see where Trinity chorus is actually on foot switch number 2. And if I hit that foot switch, which I just did, it's disabled. Again, I'm going to save because I want to make sure I don't lose my work. I'm saving constantly. I got a block left, and there's one more thing I love to do with acoustic guitar, and that is I like to do some delay. Now, this is entirely up to you. If you want a really in-your-face delay, there's nothing better than the vintage digital delay, which is in here, right here. And the vintage, and you can turn that all the way up to 24 bit depth. You can actually turn the mix wherever you want it. Right now, it's actually, I always set it to a time. I'm setting it to quarter note. You can't hear the stereo. I'm sorry about that. But this is actually, because of the scale being at 75%, this is actually in stereo. If I set the scale to 100%, it's mono. If you set it to 98%, it's got a real big stereo thickening thing it does. For solo playing, if you're going to add a looper or something like that, this kind of delay is really great. The sample rate was low here. If I turn it way up, it'll be really, really brisk and bright. So you can do that. My favorite delay anymore has become a tie between something called the transistor tape, which is less in your face than the vintage digital, and then the Adriatic delay. One of the guys at Line 6 who happens to be just really, really smart and good at this is a guy named Ben Adrian, and he actually took a time, whatever they Memory Man delay, that I think they call it Elephant Man in here, and he took away some of its shortcomings to make it work a little bit better for more musicians. I turn up the headroom, I turn this on, level I leave alone, spread I always put it to maximum because I find that it sounds great in stereo, but then it works fine in mono as well. Mix is never that high. It's probably always around 44. You'll notice I changed the BBD size to 8192 so that I get the maximum delay time and ability. Feedback here's at 50%. That's way too high. Noise I like all the way off. And scale I want all the way up but down a couple points so that it gives you a little bit of depth. I don't move the delay. I like it right before the reverb. I don't move the chorus. I like it right before the delay and before the reverb. I'm going to take this guy here, the delay, and I am going to assign it to, whoops, I do that up here. I'm going to assign it to foot switch number 3. So now you would look like this. You'd have your Trinity chorus, which is right here. You'd have your Adriatic delay. Again, let's make sure, I'm going to close this so you can't see it anymore. My trails are on. I always turn them on for every single device that has that. So I just turned it off, as you can see. Now we have a finished preset. We have started with an impulse response from my set number 108, and that has actually got a little bit of a low cut, and the level's being boosted to -4. I have the Studio Tube preamp. You can actually experiment, by the way, with gain in that. Some people like it higher, some people like it lower, and then they boost it somewhere else in the chain. but you do want to set your sensitivity to line on this. Otherwise, you won't be able to, it won't pick it up enough because you're feeding it a line signal. Then the next guy here is my EQ. You want to learn all about EQ. I will say this, if you really feel like the sound is boomy at this point, instead of increasing the low cut there, go to your EQ and do the same low cut here and then maybe a little bit more. You might find sometimes when you do a low cut in multiple blocks that it actually controls your low end a little bit better. Honestly, I don't find that true on electric guitar, but I do find it true on acoustic guitar. Your LA Studio comp, I'm telling you, if you just used the default parameters when you first bring it in, you're probably good. Rochester's also a good one. My volume pedal is here, and you can probably hear that it's always active. I mostly only need to turn it down to get it out of the mix when I'm tuning, and your tuning button on your tuning foot switch on your Pod Go will do the same thing. I don't use the wah all. I already showed you what I did there. I made sure to disable it from the toe switch here, just like I disabled the volume pedal from the toe switch, and it changed the way it behaved. I don't use the loop, but you're welcome to, and you can put it wherever it works well with whatever else you're doing. And you can add a delay and a reverb, obviously the chorus if you want to. I hope that this was all helpful to you. And I will include a link in the YouTube video where you can download this particular tutorial for free. It will not work unless you install my impulse responses, and I will include a link for that everywhere that is necessary as well. I hope you enjoyed this. Hope it wasn't too long. Hope you. I'm not a pro like some of those other guys like Jason and Steve with names like that. But I am. I do hope that this has helped you, and I hope that you stop watching YouTube and go make some awesome and beautiful music. Have a fantastic and blessed day.